Adam was the last honest mechanic in a town where only liars seemed to survive. His small, weathered garage sat on the edge of a dusty street, surrounded by bigger, flashier shops run by businessmen who cared only about profit, not people. Day after day, Adam worked alone, scraping by, fixing cars with nothing but his skill and his integrity. He didn't charge a fortune, and he never tried to swindle anyone. His hands were calloused, his heart was heavy, and his business, just barely holding on, was as much a part of the town as the rusting cars he worked on. The sky had darkened, and the rain had begun to fall in sheets, hammering down like a drumbeat. Adam wiped the sweat from his brow and reached for a wrench when he heard the faint hum of an engine sputtering nearby. Through the misty rain, a sleek foreign car pulled up, its engine coughing and sputtering. The windows were fogged up, and the car lurched to a stop right in front of his shop. A strange sight, especially on a day like this. Foreign cars didn't break down in Adam's neck of the woods, at least not without a reason. People with money didn't usually wander into his little corner of the world. He stared at the car for a moment, unsure of whether to approach or just let it sit there, a shiny reminder of the life he never had. Then the door opened. A woman stepped out. She was young, probably in her late 20s, with dark hair damp from the rain and eyes that looked as if they were carrying the weight of the world. She looked at him with a mixture of desperation and hope. Her expression was guarded, but there was something raw about her, something that immediately drew him in like a magnet. She looked like someone who had been through a lot, someone who was used to solving problems on her own, but for some reason she couldn't fix this one. "Hey," she called, her voice shaking slightly, whether from the cold or fear he couldn't tell. "I think my car's broken." Adam walked slowly towards her, wiping his hands on a rag. "Looks like it," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out." She gave him a faint smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I don't have much money," she said quickly. "I was hoping, maybe you could take a look just for a bit?" Adam paused. Money. It was always about money. He could sense the hesitation in her voice, but there was something about her that made him want to help. He wasn't sure why, but he decided it didn't matter. He didn't need a reason. He'd seen enough in this world to know when someone was desperate, when they were trying to stay afloat. "I'll take a look," he said, wiping the rainwater from his face. "No charge. Just, let's see what's going on." She blinked, surprised, but then nodded, her relief palpable. "Thank you." Adam moved to the front of the car, popping the hood open and squinting inside. There was a hiss of steam and a dull, ominous clicking sound. He could tell the car had been running hot for a while. He started to work, his hands moving automatically, but his mind was elsewhere. He was used to being alone, but there was something about this woman, something unspoken, that made him wonder if his life, his quiet, predictable life, was about to change in a way he couldn't yet understand. As Adam worked, his hands moving swiftly and confidently over the engine, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about this woman wasn't quite right. There was a tension in the air, a sort of undercurrent that he couldn't place. He glanced at her occasionally, noticing how she shifted uncomfortably in place, her eyes darting nervously. It wasn't the kind of nervousness that came from being in a mechanic's shop, she was far too well put together for that, but a deeper, more unsettling kind of fear. Something was haunting her. But it didn't matter. Adam had seen his fair share of broken people over the years, and if there was one thing he couldn't stand, it was watching someone suffer in silence. She didn't look like she was from around here, and it was obvious that she wasn't used to being on the receiving end of kindness. People like her, well, they didn't end up in places like his garage, not unless something had gone terribly wrong. He kept working, tuning out his thoughts, focusing on the car's engine. The engine was hot, clearly overheated, but he could fix it. He always could. It was just a matter of time, and that was something Adam didn't have much of. His debts had piled up, the bills sat on his kitchen counter waiting for a signature, and the gas tank in his old truck was dangerously close to empty. But all of that seemed irrelevant now. The car in front of him had been brought to him for a reason. And he wasn't about to turn this woman away. The minutes stretched into hours and the rain kept falling, a constant drumbeat against the roof of the shop. Adam worked quietly, methodically, while the woman hovered nearby. She had stopped fidgeting and had instead taken a seat on a nearby stool, her gaze fixed on him with a mix of gratitude and wariness. Every now and then she would glance around as though expecting someone to appear, but no one did. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Adam stepped back and wiped his hands on his rag. There, he said, his voice rough but satisfied. Should be good to go. Just needed a little coolant and some time. You're all set. The woman stood up, her face softening with relief, though she still seemed cautious. She looked at him, eyes wide. Thank you, she said quietly. You didn't have to do this. Adam shrugged, wiping his hands on his jeans. I didn't mind. No charge. You're lucky you found me. This car could have been a lot worse off. Her expression faltered slightly, like she was debating something. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say more but held herself back. I don't know how to repay you, she said, her voice thick with emotion, as though the words were heavy with something unspoken. Adam was about to say that it didn't matter, that he didn't need anything from her, when he noticed her hands shaking ever so slightly as she reached for her purse. She began but then stopped, shaking her head. It's just so hard, you know? I can't ask for help, and I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. He stepped forward, his voice more gentle now. It's fine. I'm not asking for anything. Sometimes you just help people. That's all. She blinked at him, the vulnerability in her eyes clear now. I don't know how to trust anyone anymore, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain outside. I didn't expect anyone to be kind to me like this. Adam's heart softened, but he knew better than to press. He'd been around long enough to understand that people, especially people like her, didn't open up easily. There was more to her story than she was willing to say. But that was okay. He didn't need to know everything. She stood up slowly, her fingers gripping the strap of her purse as though it was a lifeline. I'll never forget this, she said, her voice steadier now, but still layered with that unspoken fear. Thank you. Truly. Adam gave her a nod, stepping back to the workbench. No need to thank me. Just take care of yourself. With one last lingering look, the woman turned and left the garage, disappearing into the misty rain. Adam stood there for a moment, watching the empty street outside. He hadn't asked her any questions. He hadn't pried into her life. It wasn't his place after all. And yet, something in his gut told him that this encounter wasn't over. In fact, he had the strangest feeling that this was just the beginning. As he wiped his hands again and glanced at the now quiet car, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of storm had followed her here. And, more than that, what kind of storm was about to change his own life. The rain had finally stopped, but the silence that followed felt just as heavy. Adam wiped the sweat off his forehead, leaning against the workbench as he tried to shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Something about the woman, the way she'd looked at him, the unease she carried, the odd vulnerability that surfaced for just a moment, lingered in his mind. But then again, people came and went in this town. Everyone had their own troubles, their own reasons for holding their cards close to their chest. He tried to put her out of his mind as he started cleaning up, but just as he grabbed the mop, he heard the unmistakable sound of a luxury car engine purring down the street. He froze. His stomach churned. It was him. Sure enough, a sleek, black Mercedes pulled up to the curb in front of the garage, the polished metal gleaming even under the fading light. Adam's shoulders tensed. He didn't need to look up to know who was behind the wheel. Tanner Hayes. Local rich kid. Spoiled, arrogant, and an all-around pain in the ass. And for some reason he had it out for Adam. Tanner had been trying to get Adam to sell the garage for years, but Adam wasn't about to give up his life's work to someone who thought money could buy everything. Tanner, with his family's deep pockets and entitlement, had always seen Adam's simple garage as a joke, something beneath him, something to be humiliated. And Adam had become the perfect target. Tanner would often stop by just to taunt him, to remind him that no matter how much blood, sweat, and oil Adam put into his work, he would always be beneath people like him. Adam took a deep breath and straightened up, preparing himself for another round. Tanner wasn't the kind of guy to let a little thing like respect get in his way. Hey Adams. Tanner called out, stepping out of the car with the swagger of someone who thought he owned the place. His designer sunglasses, despite the overcast weather, hung carelessly on his nose. Still working on those rust buckets, huh? Adam forced a smile. Something like that. Tanner's eyes scanned the garage, his gaze briefly lingering on the workbench, before moving to the empty spot where the woman's car had been parked. He leaned forward, his voice dripping with sarcasm. What's this? New customer? Maybe you've been doing some work for the big shots around here. Don't tell me you've finally moved up from fixing junk to handling the real cars? Adam's fists clenched, but he kept his cool. He wasn't going to take the bait. "I take care of what I can, Tanner. Nothing more, nothing less." Tanner smirked, clearly not satisfied with the answer. His gaze sharpened as he looked over at him, then shifted to something, or rather, someone else. The corner of his mouth twitched as he noticed something behind Adam's shoulder. "Speaking of," Tanner said, a gleam of interest in his eyes, "I think I just saw someone I'd like to get to know better." He walked past Adam, the leather soles of his shoes clicking on the concrete floor. Adam turned, confusion washing over him. The woman, Sophia, had returned. She was standing at the door, hesitating as if she was unsure whether to come back inside. She looked like she was about to speak, but Tanner was already walking towards her, a confident smile spreading across his face. "Hey there, beautiful," Tanner said, his voice laced with charm. "I couldn't help but notice you've been here a while. Need a lift somewhere? Maybe you'd prefer something more comfortable than whatever you've got parked out front." He gestured towards his Mercedes, his tone suggesting he thought she'd be interested. Sophia stiffened, her eyes flashing a momentary look of discomfort. Adam's protective instincts kicked in, but he stood frozen, caught between wanting to intervene and knowing that Tanner was the kind of person who wouldn't back off easily. Sophia glanced at Adam for a brief second, a subtle but noticeable shift in her expression. She looked like she wanted to say something but hesitated, torn between being polite and dismissing Tanner outright. Adam knew the type. Tanner would pester her, push until she either accepted or left. It was part of his game. He enjoyed making others uncomfortable, forcing them into situations where they felt obligated to play along with his false politeness. "Thanks, but I'm fine," Sophia finally said, her voice firm but tinged with a quiet unease. Tanner chuckled, clearly sensing she wasn't taking the bait. He turned back to Adam, his expression turning more calculating. "So, I guess you've got a lot of interesting people coming through here now, huh?" he said with a knowing look. "Who knows, maybe you'll start hanging with the big boys soon enough." He smirked and gave Adam a final glance before climbing back into his car, the engine roaring to life as he sped off. Adam watched him go, a deep sense of unease settling in his gut. Tanner's interest in Sophia didn't sit right with him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. But why her? And why now? He turned to Sophia, his voice a little softer. "You okay?" She met his eyes, but the fear he'd seen earlier was back in her gaze, hidden behind a mask of politeness. "I'm fine," she said, but Adam could tell it wasn't the whole truth. There was something she wasn't telling him. The next morning, the garage felt emptier than usual. The sharp scent of oil and gasoline hung in the air, but the quiet was oppressive. Adam stood by the workbench, his hands idle for the first time in years. The clanking of tools and the hum of machines were missing, replaced only by the sound of his own restless thoughts. He kept replaying the brief encounter with Tanner the day before, the way he had so easily slid into the space between him and Sophia. It wasn't just the words Tanner had thrown around, it was the unspoken things, the subtle power plays. Adam couldn't shake the feeling that Tanner wasn't just messing with him. He was messing with Sophia too. And now she was gone. Adam had told himself that she'd be back, that he hadn't seen the last of her. After all, people like Sophia didn't just vanish. Or did they? Maybe in a place like this, the small-town secrets and undercurrents ran deeper than he'd ever realized. He tried to stay busy to keep his hands occupied, but his mind wandered back to her every time he picked up a tool. Her delicate features, the way she seemed to always be on the edge of saying something but never quite did. The way she had looked at him, almost as if she was measuring him, trying to figure out if she could trust him. He didn't understand it. He didn't understand her. The day dragged on, and by late afternoon, the usual clamor of the street outside had settled into a hollow quiet. The familiar sounds of the town, kids laughing, cars passing, people talking, had evaporated, replaced by an eerie stillness. And then, as the shadows lengthened and the sunlight dimmed, he realized she hadn't come back. He sat down on a stool, wiping his hands on a rag, his heart sinking lower with each passing minute. He didn't know why, but the feeling of unease refused to let go of him. The door to the garage creaked open and Adam's head snapped up, his heart leaping for a moment. But when he saw no one standing there, only a slight gust of wind stirring the hanging sign, his chest tightened with disappointment. He had been expecting her to walk through that door again. He wanted to believe that it was just an ordinary visit, that she'd been in a rush or something had come up. But everything about her felt too deliberate. The way she had appeared out of nowhere. The way Tanner had circled around her like a hawk. There was something bigger at play here, something Adam couldn't see yet. For hours he waited, staring at the entrance to the garage, as if willing her to walk back through. But the hours stretched into twilight, then into night. The quiet of the town seemed louder now, almost mocking in its stillness. There was no knock, no sound of a car pulling up. Adam tried to ignore the nagging feeling in the back of his mind, but it gnawed at him. He stood up and grabbed his jacket, throwing it on in a rush. He needed to do something, anything to distract himself from the weight pressing down on him. He stepped outside, his boots sinking into the damp earth as he walked to the front of the garage. The streetlights flickered to life, casting long shadows across the empty road. He looked down the street, hoping for a glimpse of her, hoping to hear the sound of her car pulling up. But there was nothing. It was as if she had never existed. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He had no explanation, no way to make sense of it. She had come in like a storm, but now she was gone, leaving nothing but the ghosts of her presence in his mind. Adam turned back toward the garage, the familiar scent of oil and metal filling his lungs. But it wasn't the same anymore. Everything felt different now. The air felt colder, the workbench too still. His chest tightened as a dull ache spread through him, an ache he couldn't explain but one that was familiar. He had helped her. He had wanted nothing in return. But now it was as if the universe had closed its doors, leaving him in the dark. Something wasn't right, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized how little he actually knew about her. He didn't know who she was, what she really needed, or why she had appeared in his life so suddenly. But he did know one thing: he couldn't let it go. Sophia was out there somewhere. And he was going to find her. It began subtly at first. A sleek, black SUV rolled up to the garage, its tinted windows reflecting the setting sun. Adam barely took notice as he tightened a bolt under the hood of an old pickup truck. But then another one arrived. And another. Soon, his small-town garage, which had only known the rumble of beat-up sedans and rusted minivans, was filled with the low hum of expensive engines and the unmistakable gleam of luxury. At first, Adam thought it was a coincidence, a string of affluent customers who, for some unknown reason, had heard about his shop. But as the day wore on, the luxury cars didn't stop coming. One by one they pulled up, parked in front of the rusted metal building like a parade of polished steel and glass. Each car seemed more extravagant than the last, the latest models of Ferrari, Bentley, and Rolls-Royce. Each driver, a polished version of the last, walked into his garage with an air of confidence that screamed money and power. Adam wiped his hands on his rag, his mind racing. There was no logical explanation for this. A mechanic's garage in a sleepy town wasn't the sort of place these people would flock to. But as he glanced at the parking lot, he saw the same thing. Every car gleaming under the flickering lights, each more expensive than the next. The first few hours felt like a strange dream. Adam worked on each car, fixing brakes, swapping out batteries, adjusting engines, with his usual steady hands. But the faces, the smiles, the polite nods from his clients, all seemed foreign to him. They were too poised, too polished. And yet, there was something familiar about them. By mid-afternoon, whispers began to spread through the town. The local gossip mill, fueled by idle hands and too many cups of coffee, exploded. People who had never set foot in Adam's garage before now found reasons to stop by. Some were there to gawk, others to learn what was really going on. "Did you see those cars?" one neighbor asked, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and suspicion. "Must be at least $1 million worth of vehicles parked out there. I heard someone say that garage belongs to a big shot. Maybe that mechanic's not just a mechanic, huh?" Another person muttered as they crossed the street, casting furtive glances at the building. Soon the small-town gossip spiraled out of control. Whispers filled the diner, the post office, the corner store. Was Adam suddenly part of some underground luxury car circuit? Was he being paid to fix these high-end vehicles because of his talent? Or was something more sinister at play? The more people spoke, the more the rumors took root, and with them, suspicion. As the sun dipped lower, a sleek black Maserati pulled into the lot, the deep purr of its engine reverberating through the street. A tall, well-dressed man stepped out, wearing an expression of cool detachment. He surveyed the scene, his eyes flickering briefly over Adam, who was hunched over the engine of another luxury car. "Is this the place?" the man asked, his voice smooth but carrying an edge. "It's a garage," Adam replied, wiping his hands and trying to shake off the unease settling in his chest. The man smiled, a thin, calculating grin. That's what I heard. A mechanic with a reputation. Adam frowned, not understanding. But as the man leaned closer, he could see the glint of recognition in his eyes. You must be Adam, the man said, his gaze piercing. I've heard a lot about you. The words didn't sit right with Adam. They felt wrong, like a warning. He had no idea who this man was or how he had found out about his shop, but the shift in atmosphere was undeniable. The town had started to notice, and the whispers had already started to darken. Soon there was more than just curiosity in the air. It was envy. And worse, resentment. Adam could feel it. The eyes on him. The glances that lingered a little too long. Some of the locals began showing up at the garage, their faces lined with judgment and confusion. Why was a mechanic, someone they had always seen as just one of them, suddenly associated with the wealth and power that these luxury cars represented? What had happened? What was his connection to all of this? But not everyone was asking questions out of curiosity. Some people were already looking for ways to tear him down. Old rivalries began resurfacing, buried resentments found their voice. People who had once smiled at him in the street now avoided his gaze, their smiles tight-lipped. And it wasn't just the small-time folks who resented his sudden rise in attention. The higher-ups, the ones with connections and wealth, began to circle like sharks, each one eyeing him, trying to figure out what he was really about. It was only a matter of time before the town's dark side showed its face. Adam stood in the middle of the parking lot, watching as car after car pulled in, their luxury frames casting long shadows across the dusty ground. He wasn't sure what to make of it all, but one thing was clear. The quiet life he had always known was quickly slipping away, replaced by something darker and more complicated. And as he looked around at the faces that now surrounded him, Adam felt an unfamiliar weight settle on his shoulders. He had no idea what this meant for him or for Sophia. But he knew, nothing would ever be the same again. The truth hit Adam like a sledgehammer. It came on a Tuesday afternoon, under the weight of a single phone call. His hands were covered in grease, the familiar smell of oil mixing with the sweat of a long day's work, when the voice on the other end of the line froze him in place. Adam, a calm, almost apologetic voice said, I think it's time we talk about Sophia. It was an unfamiliar voice, but it carried authority. The man introduced himself as Edward Ashford, a name Adam had never heard before. He was polite but direct, and soon, the words began to unravel the mystery that had been hanging over Adam's head for days. Sophia's real name was not Sophia at all. Her full name was Sophia Ashford, and she was the daughter of the Ashford family, a name that carried weight in the world of high-end luxury brands, finance, and corporate power. The Ashfords were a dynasty of wealth, a family with so much influence that their name was whispered in boardrooms across the world. They owned several businesses, including a prestigious car manufacturing company, and their fortune was vast. But it wasn't just money that defined them. The Ashfords were known for their ruthlessness, their ability to thrive where others failed, and their unyielding pursuit of success. As the details unraveled, Adam could hardly process them. Sophia, the woman he had tried so hard to understand, was not just a young woman in trouble. She was the key to saving her family's empire. Her father, Edward Ashford, explained that the family's business was crumbling under corrupt leadership. But there was a problem. No one trusted anyone within their own circle. The Ashfords needed someone from the outside, a person with integrity, someone who could see through the lies and salvage what was left of the company. That person they believed was Adam. Sophia was sent to you, Edward explained, his voice calm but heavy with implication. Not as a charity case, but because she believed you were the one who could help. She believed that in you, there was someone who could rebuild what we've lost, someone who could give the family back its soul. Adam was stunned. He had always known that Sophia was hiding something, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. She had come to him not out of desperation, but out of a belief that he could save the very thing she had been born into, a legacy that she had watched deteriorate from the inside. But why didn't she just tell me? Adam asked, his voice thick with confusion and disbelief. Edward's tone softened. She couldn't. The family, they'd been burned too many times. They didn't trust anyone from the inside. Sophia needed to see who you really were, away from all the power, the money, the expectations. She wanted to know if you were the kind of man who could love her for who she truly is, not for what she represented. Adam's mind raced, trying to process everything. He thought back to their conversations, to the way Sophia had always seemed so reluctant to reveal too much, as if there was always something she was keeping hidden. And yet, despite it all, he had felt drawn to her, something genuine, something real beneath the surface. She wanted to be loved for herself, Edward continued, not as the heir to a fortune. But there's more to this. The family is in danger. They're under threat from every angle, and if the business fails, well, we both know how that ends. We need you, Adam. We need someone like you, someone who's not afraid to do what's right. Adam felt the weight of those words crash down on him. He wasn't sure what to believe anymore. The town, the cars, the luxury, it had all seemed so foreign, so out of place. But now it made sense. He was a pawn in a much bigger game, and Sophia, she had been a part of that game from the very beginning. But something was different. As much as he resented the idea of being used, as much as he struggled with the idea that the woman he had cared for had lied to him, Adam couldn't ignore the part of him that still wanted to believe in her. In Sophia. She had trusted him even if it was in her own way. She had come to him not just to fix cars, but to fix something broken inside herself. And that meant something. It had to. Sophia, she never wanted to drag you into this, Edward said as if reading his thoughts. She wanted to protect you from it. But now it's too late. The family needs you. She needs you. Adam stared out the window, his heart heavy with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and something else he couldn't name. He had no idea where this would lead, but one thing was certain. His life was no longer simple. He was in this whether he liked it or not. And Sophia, she was more than just a woman in trouble. She was part of a world Adam had never known, and now it seemed he was part of it too. The world seemed to tilt beneath Adam's feet the day the police arrived at his garage. It was a quiet morning, the kind where the sun barely broke through the clouds, and the streets of the small town were still damp from the night's rain. Adam was under a hood of an old truck, tightening a bolt, when he heard the unmistakable sound of sirens. At first he didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just another emergency, another accident on the highway. But when the squad car screeched to a halt outside his garage, Adam knew something was wrong. He wiped his hands on a rag and stepped outside, confused. The officer who stepped out of the car wasn't someone he knew, but the look on his face was enough to freeze Adam's blood. The man was tall, stern, and had that air of authority that made you want to stay out of his way. "Are you Adam Kelly?" the officer asked, his voice sharp and cold. "That's me," Adam replied, frowning. "What's this about?" Before the officer could answer, a sleek black car pulled up behind the squad car, its tinted windows reflecting the gray sky. Adam didn't need to guess who it was. Ethan Grant, the local rich kid who'd been trying to make Adam's life hell for years, stepped out. His smirk was as cocky as ever, and Adam's heart sank. "This is a mistake," Adam muttered under his breath, but it was too late. Ethan was already walking toward him, his eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. The officer turned to Ethan and nodded as if confirming something. "Mr. Grant has some concerns about your business practices, Mr. Kelly," the officer said, his tone suddenly formal. "He's accused you of fraud." Adam's mind spun. Fraud? He was a mechanic. He fixed cars for a living, not exactly the type of person you'd expect to be running some shady operation. But the officer's gaze never wavered, and Ethan's smirk only grew wider. "You've been taking advantage of your clients, Mr. Kelly," Ethan said smoothly. "Charging them for work you never did, overpricing repairs. You're scamming people left and right. I have evidence." Adam's stomach churned. He couldn't believe it. Ethan was just trying to ruin him, just like he had with so many others in the past. He knew Ethan wasn't above using his family's influence to cause trouble. But now it was real. The accusation was out in the open, and Adam's reputation, everything he had built, was on the line. The officer looked at Adam, his face unreadable. "We're going to need to search your garage, Mr. Kelly. And you're going to have to come with us." Adam's chest tightened. His heart pounded in his ears. He had nothing to hide, but he knew how this worked. One accusation, one lie, and he could be dragged through the mud for good. He couldn't afford a scandal. Not with the garage already struggling, not with everything else on his plate. The officer stepped toward the door of the garage, but Adam's feet felt like they were stuck in cement. He opened his mouth to protest, but nothing came out. He felt trapped, his life spiraling out of his control. But then something snapped inside him. He wasn't going to just stand there and let his life be destroyed by lies. He had worked too hard for this. He had always done what was right, and he wasn't going to back down now, not for Ethan Grant, not for anyone. "Hold on a second," Adam said, his voice steady despite the panic brewing in his chest. You're accusing me of fraud? You have no proof, and you're going to ruin my life over some baseless accusations. Ethan's smirk faltered for a moment, but then he leaned in closer, his voice dripping with condescension. You don't know how this works, Adam. I've got enough money and connections to make sure this goes the way I want. You're going to be made an example of. And you can't fight that. Adam clenched his fists, his knuckles white. He had a choice to make. He could fight, risk everything, his reputation, his freedom, maybe even his future. Or he could walk away, submit, let the tide of lies swallow him whole. For a moment, Adam thought about the people who depended on him. The old woman who always came in for small repairs, the single mother whose car he'd fixed for free just last week. What would they think if he just gave up? What would Sophia think if he let this happen? I'm not going anywhere, Adam said firmly, his voice low but resolute. You want to search my garage? Fine. But if you're going to drag me through the mud, you better be ready for a fight. The officer gave him a hard look, but there was something in his gaze that shifted, just slightly. Adam could see the doubt flicker across his face, the uncertainty. Ethan was powerful, but not all the power in the world could make a man do something he didn't believe was right. And for the first time in a long while, Adam realized he wasn't as alone as he thought. As the officer nodded and began the search, Adam felt the weight of the situation. It wasn't just about his garage anymore. It was about standing up for what was right. It was about proving that a man could be honest no matter the odds. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The tension in the town was palpable. Adam's heart raced with every passing moment, each minute dragging him deeper into a web of suspicion and lies. The false accusations had spread like wildfire, infecting every corner of the town. His garage was no longer just a business. It was a symbol of everything he stood to lose. The weight of it all pressed down on him, suffocating him with the doubt that threatened to consume his every thought. But just when it seemed like all hope was slipping through his fingers, the door of his garage creaked open. Adam looked up, half expecting it to be another group of curious onlookers or worse, another officer sent to search his property again. Instead, the figure stepping into the dimly lit space made his heart skip a beat. Sophia. She walked in like a whirlwind, her presence immediately filling the room with an energy Adam hadn't realized he'd been missing. Her eyes locked with his, and for a moment the world outside faded. There was no more talk of fraud, no more lies about him. All that mattered was that Sophia had returned. But this time there was something different about her. The calmness in her demeanor was gone, replaced by a fiery determination that burned brightly in her gaze. Without a word, she marched to the center of the garage and turned to face the small crowd that had gathered outside the open door. Adam could feel the tension in the air tighten even more as the murmurs of the onlookers reached his ears. I know why you're all here, Sophia's voice rang out, strong and clear. You've come to watch a man fall, to watch him be destroyed by a lie. But I'm here to tell you the truth. The words hit Adam like a hammer. He felt a wave of disbelief wash over him, but at the same time, an overwhelming sense of hope began to flicker inside him. Sophia wasn't here to stay hidden in the shadows. She was ready to fight. I'm Sophia Grant, she continued, her voice unwavering. I'm the daughter of the man who's been trying to ruin Adam. Ethan Grant, the one who accused him of fraud. She paused, letting the name sink in, watching the shocked faces around her. But there's more. The reason I came here, the reason I ended up in Adam's life is because my family, my father, has been hiding the truth for years. And I couldn't stand by any longer while innocent people like Adam got caught in his web of lies. Adam's breath caught in his throat as the crowd grew silent. He could see the disbelief on their faces, their shock at what Sophia was revealing. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about a man who had spent years manipulating everyone around him, twisting the truth to his advantage. Ethan's world, his power, his influence, it was all built on lies. I came here to find someone, Sophia said, her eyes meeting Adam's for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Someone who wasn't corrupted by money, who still believed in honesty and integrity. Someone who could see past the wealth and the power and understand what truly matters. The crowd stood frozen, waiting for the bombshell to drop. Sophia didn't disappoint. Adam Kelly, she said, her voice now full of warmth and admiration, is the man I was looking for. He's not just a mechanic. He's a man of honor, someone who has always done the right thing no matter the cost. And when I found him, I knew this was the person I had been searching for. There was a pause, a breathless silence as the weight of Sophia's words hung in the air. Adam stood still, unsure of what to say, unsure of how to react. The moment was too surreal, too impossible to grasp. But then Sophia turned back to the crowd, her voice rising with renewed passion. My father's empire is built on lies and manipulation. He's been using people for years, taking advantage of their trust and their loyalty. But Adam is the one who has shown me what true loyalty and honesty look like. And I'm here to make sure that the truth is known. She took a step forward, her presence commanding the room. The crowd was no longer a distant, uninterested group of onlookers. They were leaning in, hanging on every word, their minds racing as the truth began to take shape before them. You've all been fed a story, Sophia continued. A story crafted by my father and his network of influence. But it's time for that story to end. Adam Kelly is not a criminal. He's not a fraud. He's the one who's been wronged, and I'm here to make sure everyone knows it. And just like that, the floodgates opened. The murmurs of disbelief turned into whispers of realization. People who had once doubted Adam began to look at him with new eyes. Those who had questioned his integrity now saw the man he truly was. The man Sophia had come to trust. The man who had saved her from the darkness of her family's twisted influence. Adam's heart swelled with gratitude, but there was no time to bask in the victory just yet. He had been given a chance to reclaim his life, to show the town who he really was. As Sophia stood beside him, her hand brushing against his, Adam felt a surge of hope, of power, and of love. The battle wasn't over yet. There would still be challenges to face, still obstacles to overcome. But for the first time in a long time, Adam felt like he could breathe again. The truth had been exposed, and with it, the chains of injustice had been shattered. And Adam knew in that moment that this was only the beginning. The dust had barely settled from the chaos of the past few days, but Adam found himself standing at the same workbench, his hands covered in grease, just like they had always been. The familiar scent of oil and metal filled the air of his garage, a place he had spent years building with his own two hands. Yet for the first time, everything felt different. The town, once so quick to judge and condemn, was beginning to look at him with new eyes. His reputation had been restored, not by the promises of wealth or the clinking of coins, but by his unwavering integrity. And it wasn't just the people of the town who had changed their perception. Adam felt like a different man too. Sophia's words echoed in his mind. You're the one I've been looking for. The weight of that declaration lingered, filling him with a sense of warmth he had never experienced before. He had always thought of himself as a simple man, bound to the dirt and grease of his work. But now it felt like the world was opening up to him in ways he couldn't have imagined. As the sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow over the town, Adam caught sight of Sophia pulling up in her car. The same car she had arrived in that rainy day, the car that had led to everything. She stepped out, her smile radiant as ever, and for a moment the world seemed to stand still. She walked over to him, her eyes meeting his, and the bond between them felt undeniable. Without a word, she wrapped her arms around him, holding him tightly. Adam's heart raced, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt at peace. The troubles, the trials, and the heartbreak were all a distant memory now. You were right, you know, Sophia said, her voice soft and full of sincerity. You've always been the kind of man who does the right thing even when it's hard. Adam chuckled, his hand gently brushing the back of her hair. It wasn't always easy, but it was worth it. He pulled away slightly, looking down at her with a look of admiration. I never thought I'd find someone who believed in me, someone who could see beyond all the dirt and the grease. But you did. Sophia smiled, her eyes sparkling with emotion. I didn't just believe in you, Adam. I saw you. And I saw someone who was capable of so much more than just fixing cars. You're capable of fixing lives, of making things right. And I'm lucky enough to be part of that now. It wasn't just words. Adam could feel it in the way she looked at him, in the way she held him. Sophia had shown him that there was more to life than the struggle, more to it than simply surviving. There was love. There was partnership. There was a future. They stood there for a moment, taking in the stillness of the evening, the quiet comfort of knowing that everything was falling into place. The garage that had once been a place of solitary work was now a symbol of the life they were going to build together. The truth, the love, the redemption, everything had come full circle. The man who had once been overlooked, the man who had been treated as nothing more than a mechanic, was now standing at the cusp of something more. And for the first time in his life, Adam was ready to embrace it. As Sophia stepped back, taking his hand in hers, they both knew that their journey was just beginning. The small-town mechanic and the woman from a world of luxury, they had found a way to make it work, to build something that was real. "Let's build something new," Adam said, his voice full of determination. "Together." Sophia nodded, her eyes filled with love and confidence. "Together." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting its final rays over the garage, Adam realized that his life had changed forever. He was still the same man, honest, hardworking, and unyielding in his belief in doing the right thing. But now he had something more. He had love, he had a partner, and most importantly he had a future. A future that was theirs to build.